Imagine, for a second, that you could reach into the chest of the global economy and wrap your hand around its heart. I'm not talking about the New York Stock Exchange. I'm not talking about the oil fields of Saudi Arabia. And I'm certainly not talking about the printing presses at the Federal Reserve. I'm talking about a single nondescript science park on the coast of an island that officially doesn't exist. This is Hsinchu. To the untrained eye, it looks like a boring collection of office buildings and factories. It looks like any other industrial park in Ohio or Shenzhen. But inside these walls, in rooms cleaner than a hospital operating theater, machines that cost more than a fighter jet are printing the future atom by atom. This is the home of TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And here is the terrifying reality that Wall Street tries to ignore, the reality that keeps generals in the Pentagon awake at night. If this one specific location goes offline, whether by an earthquake, a blockade, or a missile, the world doesn't just go into a recession. The world stops. Your iPhone? It becomes a paperweight. Your car? It won't start. The US military's F-35 fighter jets? They can't fly. The data centers running the AI revolution? They go dark. We are talking about a $2 trillion wipeout in the first 24 hours. A crash that would make the Great Depression look like a picnic. For 50 years, we thought this island was a flashpoint because of politics. We thought it was about democracy versus communism. We were wrong. It's not about ideology anymore. It is about the fact that 90% of the most advanced chips in human history, the brains of every device you touch, come from this one. Tiny earthquake-prone island sitting 100 miles away from a superpower that claims to own it. They call it the Silicon Shield. The idea is that Taiwan is so important, nobody would dare touch it because destroying Taiwan would destroy the aggressor's economy too. But today, we are going to look at the brutal truth. The shield is cracking. And what was supposed to be Taiwan's greatest insurance policy might actually be its death warrant. To understand how we got into this mess, you have to understand that this wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't some grand master strategy by the United States or China. It was an accident of history. In the 1970s, Taiwan was a place you went to buy cheap plastic toys and umbrellas. It was a low-cost labor hub trying to survive in the shadow of Red China. The government was desperate. They knew they couldn't compete on cheap labor forever. Vietnam and China were waking up, and their labor was even cheaper. Taiwan needed a miracle. They needed a pivot. And that miracle arrived in the form of a man who was already thinking about retirement, Morris Chang. In 1985, Morris wasn't a young revolutionary. He was 54 years old. He had just been passed over for the CEO job at Texas Instruments in America. He was done. He packed his bags and moved to Taiwan, mostly to relax and maybe teach a few classes. But the Taiwanese government had other ideas. Now they handed him a blank check and said, "Build us a tech industry." Now, here's the genius moment, the 0 to 1 moment that changed the world economy. Back then, every chip company in the world, Intel, Motorola, Texas Instruments, did two things. They designed the chips and they manufactured the chips. It was like a restaurant that writes the recipes and cooks the food. It was an integrated model. Morris looked at Taiwan and he was realistic. He said, "We have no designers. We have no IP. We can't compete with the genius engineers at Intel." So he did something crazy. He said, "We will just be the kitchen. We won't write the recipes. We will just cook whatever you tell us to cook." He invented the foundry model. At the time, people laughed. Jerry Sanders, the CEO of AMD, famously said, "Real men have fabs," meaning if you don't own the factory, you aren't a real chip company. Well, the joke was on Jerry, because it turns out making chips is incredibly expensive. It's the most complex manufacturing process in human history. By focusing only on manufacturing, Morris Chang and TSMC got really, really good at it. While Intel was distracted trying to design the perfect chip and build the perfect factory, TSMC just focused on the factory. They became the contract manufacturer for the world. They poured every cent of profit back into R&D, not for chip architecture, but for manufacturing process. Fast forward to today. Real men don't have fabs anymore. AMD sold theirs. NVIDIA never had one. Apple wouldn't dream of building one. Qualcomm doesn't build them. They all rely on Morris Chang's kitchen. They are all fabless. They draw the blueprints, email the PDF to Taiwan, and TSMC ships them the finished product. But here's the catch. This success created a trap. Because TSMC became so good and the equipment became so expensive, everyone else stopped trying. It became a winner-take-all market. The capital expenditure required to keep up with Moore's law became so astronomical that other companies just dropped out of the race. And now, the entire world has put all its eggs in one basket, and then it placed that basket on a geopolitical fault line. I want to pause here. Because if I just say chips are hard to make, you're going to nod and move on. You need to understand the scale of what is happening inside these factories to understand why China can just copy them. You need to understand why this isn't like building a car or a toaster. We are currently manufacturing chips at the 3 nanometer scale. Let me put that in perspective. A sheet of paper is 100,000 nanometers thick. A strand of human DNA is 2.5 nanometers wide. TSMC is mass-producing transistors that are roughly the size of a strand of DNA, and they are fitting billions of them, literally billions, onto a chip the size of your fingernail. To do this, they use a machine called the EUV lithography machine, made by a Dutch company called ASML. This machine is the most complicated object humans have ever built. It is the size of a double-decker bus. It costs $300 million per unit, and the physics inside it are bordering on magic. Here's how it works. It takes a microscopic droplet of molten tin, drops it through a vacuum, and hits it with a laser twice. The first pulse flattens the tin into a pancake. The second pulse vaporizes it into plasma closer to the temperature of the sun. This plasma emits a specific wavelength of light, extreme ultraviolet light, that is then bounced off the flattest mirrors ever made to carve patterns into silicon. It does this 50,000 times a second. If the mirrors in this machine were the size of Germany, the biggest bump on them would be less than a millimeter high. That is the level of precision we are talking about. There is only one company in the world that makes this machine, ASML in the Netherlands. And there is essentially only one company in the world that knows how to use them at scale effectively, TSMC. This is the moat. People ask, why doesn't China just steal the technology? They have tried. They have stolen blueprints. They have hacked servers. They have hired away Taiwanese engineers with triple salaries. But it doesn't work, because this isn't about blueprints. It's about tacit knowledge. It's about a culture where engineers with PhDs work 12-hour shifts, on call 24/7, fixing problems that aren't in any textbook. It's about a supply chain that involves mirrors from Germany, chemicals from Japan, and lasers from San Diego, all converging in Hsinchu. When TSMC tried to build a factory in Arizona recently, they ran into a brick wall. American workers refused to work the hours. They refused the military-style management. The unions pushed back. The costs ballooned. There were reports of American engineers leaving at 5 p.m. while the Taiwanese managers looked on in horror. This is the uncomfortable truth. The American work ethic cannot support semiconductor manufacturing anymore. We want work-life balance. We want remote work. The physics of a 3 nanometer chip does not care about your work-life balance. This is why the world is addicted to Taiwan. It's not just the machines, it's the people. It's a workforce willing to sacrifice everything for efficiency. And that is a resource that is much harder to replace than a factory. Now let's look at this from the other side of the strait. Let's look at this through the eyes of Beijing. For the Chinese Communist Party, Taiwan is not about chips. It never was. It's about the soul of the nation. Xi Jinping has based his entire legitimacy on the concept of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The narrative goes like this. China was humiliated for 100 years by Western powers. Now China is back. But the rejuvenation is not complete until every inch of Chinese territory is reclaimed. To them, Taiwan is a runaway province, a reminder of the unfinished civil war. But recently, a new problem has emerged, a practical one, a desperate one. China is the world's factory. They make your clothes, your furniture, your solar panels, your EV batteries. But China has a glass jaw. It imports massive amounts of energy, and it imports almost all of its high-end chips. China spends more money importing chips than it spends importing oil. Think about that. The world's factory cannot build its own brains. If the US wants to strangle China's economy, they don't need to bomb Beijing. They just need to cut off the supply of chips. And that is exactly what the Biden administration started doing in 2022. The US realized that AI is the next nuclear weapon. Whoever controls artificial intelligence controls the military and economic future. And AI runs on GPUs, specifically NVIDIA chips manufactured by TSMC. So the US banned the sale of these advanced chips to China. They banned the sale of the ASML machines that make the chips. They are trying to freeze China's technology in place. They are trying to keep China permanently a generation behind. So Xi Jinping is backed into a corner. He needs Taiwan for political legitimacy, but now he might need Taiwan for economic survival. If China takes Taiwan, the logic goes, they don't just get an island, they get the crown jewels of the global tech industry. They secure their future. Or do they? Here is the paradox. If China invades, the factories will likely be destroyed in the fighting. And these clean rooms are sensitive to vibrations. A missile landing 5 miles away could misalign the lasers and ruin the fab. But even if they capture them intact, ASML has a kill switch in the machines. These machines require constant software updates and spare parts from the West. Without real-time support from the Netherlands and the US, TSMC's fabs become useless metal within weeks. So, an invasion doesn't give China the chips. It destroys the chips for everyone. This brings us to the blockade scenario. This is the scenario that is far more likely than a D-Day invasion and far more dangerous for the global economy. China doesn't need to storm the beaches. They just need to park their navy around the island and say, nothing goes in, nothing comes out. Taiwan is an island with almost no natural resources. They import 97% of their energy. They have about 10 days of natural gas reserves, just 10 days. If China blockades the island, the lights go out in Hsinchu. You see, a fab isn't just a building, it's a hungry beast. It consumes massive amounts of electricity and water. If the power fluctuates for even a second, millions of dollars of wafers are ruined. If the blockade lasts 2 weeks, the clean rooms lose power. The humidity controls fail. The machines drift out of calibration. In 2 weeks, the global supply of chips stops. In 1 month, the global economy enters a depression. The supply chain for everything from Ford trucks to medical MRI machines dries up. This is the leverage Xi Jinping has. He can hold the world hostage without firing a single shot on land. He can say to the West, lift the sanctions, give us the technology, or we turn off the world's computer. So, what happens when the blockade starts? What does the US do? The official policy of the United States is strategic ambiguity, which basically means maybe we will defend you, maybe we won't. Keep guessing. It was designed to keep China cautious and Taiwan humble. But in 2024, ambiguity is becoming dangerous. Let's look at the math of a war. If the US intervenes, we are talking about World War III, a direct kinetic war between two nuclear superpowers, carriers against hypersonic missiles, satellites being shot down, submarines hunting each other in the deep Pacific. Is the US president, whoever it is, willing to trade Los Angeles for Taipei? Is the American public willing to see thousands of sailors die to protect a semiconductor factory? Recent war games by the CSIS think tank showed that in a conflict over Taiwan, the US would run out of long-range precision missiles in less than 1 week. We would lose 2 aircraft carriers. We would lose hundreds of aircraft. And here's the darkest irony of all. The US military needs TSMC chips to guide the very missiles they would use to defend TSMC. The Javelin missiles sent to Ukraine, they use chips. The F-35, it's a flying supercomputer. If the factory goes down, the US military-industrial complex grinds to a halt, too. We have outsourced the production of our own ammunition to the front line of the enemy. This has led to some terrifying rumors in Washington. They call it the broken nest strategy. The idea is simple. If China invades, and it looks like Taiwan is going to fall, the United States, or perhaps Taiwan itself, will blow up the TSMC factories. Scorched earth. If we can't have them, you can't either. A former US congressman even said this out loud. He said we should make it clear to China that if they invade, we will bomb TSMC. The logic is that if you remove the prize, you remove the incentive to invade. Imagine being a Taiwanese engineer at TSMC right now. You are the pride of your nation. You are the silicon shield. But you are also the hostage. And the gun is pointed at your head from both sides of the ocean. The Chinese want to capture you. The Americans might blow you up to save you. But wait, you say. Aren't we fixing this? Aren't we building factories elsewhere? I heard Intel is building in Ohio. TSMC is building in Japan. Yes, we are. But it's too little, too late. The CHIPS Act in the US is throwing $50 billion at the problem. Do you know how much a single advanced fab costs? $20 billion. We are bringing a water pistol to a forest fire. Furthermore, as we discussed, you can't just copy-paste the culture. The new factories in the US will produce older generation chips at a higher cost. TSMC has already delayed the Arizona plant. They are struggling to find qualified workers. Morris Chang himself said, "Globalization is dead. Free trade is dead." He knows that the era of efficiency is over. We are entering an era of resilience, and resilience is expensive. It means redundancy. It means building factories that sit idle just in case. It means higher prices for your phone, your car, and your laptop. It will take at least 10 years to build a supply chain that doesn't rely on Taiwan. 10 years to train the workforce, build the infrastructure, and perfect the physics. But Xi Jinping is 71 years old. He doesn't have 10 years. The Chinese economy is slowing down. Their demographics are collapsing. He wants to secure his legacy while he still can. The window of maximum danger is now between 2025 and 2030. This is the period where China's military is peaking, and the West is still dependent on the island. This is the danger zone. So where does this leave us? We are living through a historical anomaly. For 30 years, we allowed the most critical component of the modern world to be concentrated in the most geopolitically unstable location on the map. We did it because it was cheap. We did it because it was efficient. We did it because we thought trade would prevent war. But history has a funny way of punishing efficiency. The silicon shield is not a shield. It is a magnet. It draws the tension of the world to this one small island. It forces the great powers to stare each other down over a strip of water 100 miles wide. If you're an investor, you need to understand that every stock in your portfolio, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Microsoft, is implicitly short-selling geopolitical risk in the Taiwan Strait. They are betting that the status quo holds. They are betting that cooler heads prevail. But if you look at the speeches in Beijing and the war games in Washington, the status quo is evaporating. The language is hardening. The fleets are expanding. The microchip gave us the internet, the smartphone, and artificial intelligence. It built the modern world, and it might be the very thing that brings it all crashing down. Thanks for watching. If you want to understand how the US plans to fight this war economically, check out this video here on the weaponization of the dollar, and let me know in the comments, do you think the US would actually destroy TSMC to keep it out of Chinese hands?